So it's really great to have you tuning in with us today. We're so glad that you're here. And, you know, one of the ways that we get to grow listenership is with your participation. Yeah. Every time you leave a rating or a review, it kind of moves us to the visible place in the podcast world.
That's
and
right.
we would so appreciate your participation in that. So if you have a second, just leave us a rating or a review if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts or maybe another platform that offers ratings and reviews.
That'd be awesome.
And another way you can get the word out is to share our episodes out on your social media. Share them with your group. Chances are your Facebook friends, your Instagram followers, all of that good stuff. There's probably someone in there that is in a blended family,
that could use
and they
some
might
help.
they might be struggling. And so share the resource and see if it might give them some help.
Yes. You know, we hope that everyone enjoyed our episode last week, which was on the lighter side and kind of fun because we focused on fun family activities and ideas that you can try over the summer to encourage opportunities for bonding.
That's right.
So important. And now this week, we're tackling a very serious topic that impacts many families, those in both first family and step family dynamics.
That's
it
right.
can really impact anyone. And we've invited a special guest, Richard Capriola, I think I said that right,
You did.
to come on the show and talk about adolescent addiction. And if you're thinking right now that, this topic doesn't really apply to you and your kids aren't exposed to any kind of situation where substance abuse is going on, we want to respectfully challenge that thought process. Or maybe you're more like us and you believe that you've done a great job educating your kids around the dangers of drugs and alcohol and that they're now immune to falling into that trap of addiction. Maybe they've even told you that they'll never try drugs. Incidentally, my daughter said those exact words to me around age 13.
Right.
But just a few years later, she succumbed to peer pressure and she felt the need to escape from emotional pain through the use of substances as well as other process disorders.
Yeah.
So we can share from our experience that this is a topic that every parent, regardless of where you live or how well behaved your kids are now, every parent needs to have awareness around this issue. And you'll discover all the reasons why I say that as you listen to what Richard has to share with us. And we encourage you to stay engaged in the conversation today. Please don't tune this out.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, this is a conversation that's not only important, but it's one that can help parents, co-parents, and step-parents to face those tough realities with hope and confidence.
Yes.
Richard's really an awesome guy and a great communicator. He recently retired as an addictions counselor for adolescents and adults, which he did for over 2 decades, offering practical support, treatment options, and diagnoses of psychiatric and substance use disorders. So Richard really knows this topic inside and out. He's walked alongside parents through this journey and their kids. And because he's passionate about helping these parents, he's written a book called The Addicted Child, A Parent's Guide to Adolescent Substance Abuse. And we'll talk more about the book in our conversation with Richard, but we've both read it and we're grateful for such a concise and understandable guide around the topic.
Yeah.
It's a great tool for arming parents and helping them to be proactive in picking up on those warning signs early and then supporting their child through the recovery process. The book really could save your child's life.
I believe that's true because we've lived through this with my daughter, Annika. And during that season, we learned just how confusing and disappointing and scary this journey can be for parents.
Yeah.
And we also had times when we just wanted to kind of pretend it wasn't actually happening and kind of stick our heads in the sand, or maybe it was just me that did that.
Maybe.
I wanted to believe, it's just a phase she's going through and she'll outgrow it and she'll stop using on her own. And I really wanted to avoid a lot of those warning signs that Richard talks about.
You did try to avoid some of that. And you know what? As the step parent, I got really focused on those warning signs. And I had a different perspective than you did, honey, around Annika's behavior. And of course, that caused some tension in our relationship. And it took some intentional effort to work all this out as a team, you know, how we were going to handle the issue of Annika's drug and alcohol use. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today in our conversation with Richard.
Yeah, and we're also going to talk about how to approach the ex in your co-parenting situation, the parents in the other home, right? Around this issue if you have concerns that your child is struggling. This is all about the health and well-being of your kids.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to listen in as we interview Richard and draw from his expertise. And we're hopeful that our conversation will give you some hope around a topic that really no parent wants to have to face, right? But many of us, unfortunately, we will face this. And we really want you to know that if you ever face a season where your kids are caught up in addiction, or maybe you're already there, it's not a hopeless situation that you're in, and you're not alone. Today's conversation is about being informed and prepared to take action if and when the time comes, and to be able to do that with confidence in a way that supports your child or stepchild with love, care, and concern.
Yeah, it's a little bit like an insurance policy.
It is.
We don't like to have to talk about it, but the reality is we need to understand it just in case.
It's a reality.
Absolutely. So stick around, and we're going to jump into our conversation with Richard Capriola just on the other side of the intro. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
All right. Well, hey, we're here with Richard Capriola from Katy, Texas, who lives there in Katy with his wife, Migdalia, and your rescue dog, Pip. Is that right, Richard?
That's right. He's a rescue. He's a Schnauzer mix.
Nice.
Fun.
That's great.
Well, welcome, Richard.
Yes, we're so glad that you're joining us today. Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and we explained already that, Richard has written a book called The Addicted Child, A Parent's Guide to Adolescent Substance Abuse. But I wonder, before we get into that, Richard, if we could back up and just tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to even wanting to write this book.
Well, I've got a long history of working in education as a state level administrator in Illinois. That's where I'm originally from.
Yeah.
But as I started to transition out of that career, began working at a mental health regional crisis center. And as a result of seeing a lot of patients at the crisis center, I noticed that many of them had a substance abuse issue as well as a mental health issue. So I went back to school and got a degree in addictions counseling, basically.
Yeah.
And then was offered a job in Menninger Clinic in Houston, Texas. Menninger Clinic is a rather large psychiatric hospital that serves both adolescents and adults from everywhere. And I was hired to be an addictions counselor there. And I worked there for over a decade.
Wow.
And in the process of doing that, I was hired to be an addictions counselor for both adolescents and adults. But so many times I would sit across from families and I would go through their child's history of using a substance and give them the diagnosis. And many times after hearing that information, which was overwhelming to them, they would look across at me and they would say, I had no idea this was going on.
Wow.
Or if they did suspect their child was using a substance, they would say, I knew something was going on, but I didn't know it was this bad.
Wow.
So after I left Menninger, retired from Menninger after working there for over a decade, I wanted to put together a resource for parents that would be a very simple, easy to read book that had the basic information that I would hope every parent would need to be better aware of this issue. So I packed all of that into a book that runs about 100 pages, but each chapter is very concise and goes through a lot of different issues that hopefully parents after reading it will feel more comfortable and less afraid and better equipped to deal with this in the event that they have to. That was my goal.
Yeah, I love that. we read through it and recognized how concise it was as well. I imagine it took a lot of work to get that down into such a well-packed, condensed book. Yeah. And you said something there, to help parents not be as afraid.
Yeah.
And man, I remember when we were walking through this season with our daughter who was struggling in the area of addiction, and it was really scary.
Yeah.
It was really scary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is scary, and I think that knowledge is power. And the more parents know about this, hopefully the less afraid and better equipped they will be if in the event they have to deal with it. But I also wanted to give parents a sense of hope that with treatment, their child can get through this and can put it behind them and can move on. That treatment does work.
Yeah.
And my book explains all of the different treatment options that are available for a parent and a child. But I wanted them really to have a sense of hope that as difficult as these times can be, that their family and their child can get through this.
Yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that too. I think the three of us here are kindred spirits because we want to speak about the truth and we want to bring hope at the same time. And for these hard subjects, it's really challenging to do that.
It is.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just commend you on the book, Richard. It was an easy read as far as it's very concise. The information is right there at your fingertips. You get right to it. And it is hopeful. I feel like the book really does bring hope and awareness at the same time. So we just commend you on writing this book and really recommend it to anyone who is raising kids and wants to be educated and aware.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good feedback. I appreciate that. And it's for parents, it's for grandparents, because sometimes grandparents pick up on things that maybe we as parents don't often catch on to. And really for anybody, just to be better informed about this issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big issue. It affects a lot of families.
Yeah. It does.
Yeah. One of the things that I really zeroed in on as I was reading through it is trying to identify, if I'm kind of scratching my head and going, I'm worried about my kids. And I'm betting there's some people who are listening who are in a season where, like you said before, gosh, I knew something's up, but I'm not quite sure what's happening. And I don't quite know how to figure out what is happening. I remember being there. And so as I was reading through this, I'm reading some of the things that are some clues that I can be watching for. Yeah. And you did a great job of starting to lay some of that out. And then at the same time, as I'm reading, I think it might have been the second time I went back and read through it, I thought, what's the difference between these things that I'm reading here and just normal teenage behavior, right? Okay. Well, they're spending lots of time in their room and they're getting a little rude and snippy with me, or they're, these kinds of things. And I'm like, okay, I got a couple of teens that do that and they're not having a substance abuse problem. Yeah. Help us understand a little bit more about how you tell the difference.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great question. And throughout my book, as you guys know, there are warning signs for different substances. There's warning signs for marijuana and for alcohol, for a child that might be developing an eating disorder or self-injuring, because sometimes those will accompany a child using alcohol or drugs. And as a general rule, what I recommend to parents is pay attention to the changes that you see in your child. You know your child better than anyone else, so pay attention to these changes that you see. Don't assume that they're just normal adolescent acting out, although they may very well be just that.
Right, but don't make the assumption.
Don't make the assumption that it is. Investigate it a little bit further. So some of the examples that I give are, you may have a child who was earning very good grades and now the grades are starting to decline. You may have a child who used to participate and enjoy sports, no longer wants to do so. You may have a child who was very social and outgoing now becomes very quiet and isolating. You may have a child who introduced you to their friends. You knew who their friends were. You may have known who their families were. Now becomes very secretive of who their friends are. These can all be warning signs. And the thing to watch out for is, how long do these changes go on? If it's a temporary thing that's a day or two or three, it's probably some adolescent acting out, something going on. Right. But if it tends to linger and go on for days and weeks, and the more of these warning signs that you see, you start to see 2 and then 3 and then maybe more, then I think it's time to pull back and say, okay, there may be something going on here. I need to get some more information and maybe some assessments so that as a parent, I get the information to know what's really going on. It is a difficult situation because many kids do just act out because they're adolescents. But then sometimes these can be symptoms of an underlying issue that can be more serious. So you want to check it out.
Yeah. I wonder, if some parents are kind of afraid of accusing a child when they're just in that unsure place. Have you found that?
Or questioning.
I think so. I'm often asked, well, what's the first thing I should do if I suspect my child's using a substance? And my answer is have a discussion with the child, talk to them. That's likely to go one of two ways. It's either going to become confrontational and argumentative, or the child may actually share some information that you didn't know before. But start that conversation, not in an accusing way. You don't want to accuse the child, but from a curiosity point of view, from a concern point of view, from a love point of view, that I'm seeing these and I'm just curious as to why you think I might be seeing these changes in you. That type of approach. It's much more likely to go over well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love the way
the curiosity mindset.
Absolutely. I love the way you put that too. I'm curious as to why I might be seeing these.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that, Richard. That's really good. I think that'll work in lots of different areas, actually.
And you can use that in all of those examples you just gave of the warning signs.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is when you're having a conversation with that child, don't just listen to the words, listen to the feelings. We're pretty good at listening to other people's words when they talk to us, even adults. And when our kids talk to us, we're pretty good at hearing the words, but sometimes we're not so good at hearing the feelings underneath those words. And that's a skill every parent can learn and practice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Richard, we spoke with you, a couple weeks ago, and you shared with us, I think it was a survey that you took of adolescent kids, asking them why they choose not to share with their parents or why it's hard for them to share with their parents. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that study is actually in my book, where it's not a study I did, but it was a study that was reported when they would ask kids, what is it that keeps you from, talking to your family about issues that you're concerned with? And it seemed that the number one response that came back was a fear of being judged, that kids were afraid of being judged, especially by their parents and their family members. And I think that's an important clue that we as parents can pick up on, that it's very important that we're sensitive to not giving the impression that we're judging our children or we're judging their behavior. We may disapprove of their behavior, but we're not judging them. There's a difference between them and the behavior that we're seeing.
Right. We want to separate that and not be judgmental as we're having this conversation with our
Absolutely.
child.
Absolutely. Because that's just going to tend to make them pull further and further away if they feel that we're being too critical or too judgmental of them. So it is important that we keep the focus on, on what we're seeing and not give the impression that we're judging them as a child.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a parent, and I've got a adolescent or early teens child. And I've noticed that there's a few things, an aggregate of things happening, like you said, like multiple signs of I'm closing down, I'm not hanging out with the same friend group.
Grades are dropping.
All of those things are happening. And now it's been a month and a half. and I want to be able to sit down with this child. And you just talked about, their fear is that they're going to be judged. And I think as much as I want to speak lovingly to my kids, sometimes I just mess it up, and I know, we said we want to get there with the curiosity mindset, but I'm wondering in some really practical terms, what might be some ways that you would confront the behavior or confront what you're seeing without coming across as judging the child? Can you give a little more about that?
Sure. I would approach it again from the standpoint of being curious, of just wanting information on what you're observing and what you're seeing, not in an accusatory way. You don't want to accuse the child of doing something when you may not even be totally certain it's going on. But you are curious about the behaviors that you're seeing. And I would approach it from that standpoint. I would say, that I'm curious about this behavior or that behavior that I have been seeing. Can you help me understand why I might be seeing that? I'm curious. I want you to help me understand why I'm seeing those behaviors. Maybe you're being isolated. And I would say, I've noticed that you've sort of been keeping to yourself recently, whereas before you seem to be more outgoing. Can you share with me what you think might be going on? And at least try to open the door that way. Right. But regardless of how that decision goes, as a parent, if you are concerned, you need to move to the next step, which is to get the assessments done and have the professional evaluations, regardless of how that conversation goes.
So how do you get a resistant child, to an assessment?
They're not going to want to go. Basically,
first of all, let's just clarify.
Yeah, they're not going to want to go. They're going to fight you. They're going to get angry. They're going to get upset. They're going to try to negotiate their way out of it, like they probably have on a whole lot of other issues that are not substance related. But as the parent, I think if you're that concerned that you feel it's time to get some professional assessments done, then you just have to insist that it be done. There's no other way around this. It has to be done. And you just honestly explain that to your children from the standpoint of being concerned, not that you're punishing them, but from the standpoint, look, I'm really concerned about this. So I think we really need to get these assessments done.
Yeah. They may not want to go to the dentist or the doctor, but you're going to take them there because you want them to be healthy and you want good things for them in their life.
And you don't want it to get worse. You don't want that aching tooth to turn into something that gets much more worse, or you don't want a medical condition to get worse. And this is no different. A delay could involve the situation getting worse.
Yeah, it could make a big difference.
Absolutely. So we've talked to the child. We've been curious and not judging. Maybe they're going to be resistant to going and getting an assessment. But once we get there, what can parents expect in that experience? We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Well, they can expect, first of all, that the professionals will do a comprehensive assessment. And in my book, I list the different assessments. For example, you will want to have an addictions assessment done by somebody like myself, who was an addictions counselor, a licensed addictions counselor. That's going to give you the information you need on the extent of your child's substance use. What substances they've been using, how long they've been using, and a diagnosis. Is this substance use disorder, is it mild or is it moderate or severe? And that's all wrapped up in the addictions assessment. Then you're going to want to have a psychological or a neuropsychological assessment, which is going to get at whether or not there might be some type of underlying issue that's driving your child to use a substance. Because in some cases, a child is using a substance to medicate that underlying issue. Many of the children that I worked with who were smoking marijuana, when I asked them to help me understand why they were smoking so much marijuana, the answer that came back was, it helps me with my anxiety. So it's important as a parent that you either rule in or rule out whether or not these underlying issues might be present that could be causing your child to use a substance. And that's what a psychological or a neuropsychological evaluation will give you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one thing that our daughter Annika kind of explained to us later on down the road of her addiction journey, that she was using drugs because of all of the emotions. She just couldn't cope with all these negative emotions and everything that was coming at her. And there was a lot of confusion. And so she would use marijuana to be able to kind of numb out and escape the realities in her life.
And I think that's fairly common among a lot of children. It might be anxiety, it might be depression, it might be some bullying perhaps that they were exposed to. Could be a lot of different reasons, but they're no different than adults. When we have an intolerable thought or an intolerable feeling or an emotion, we don't like to sit with it. We're going to do something to get rid of it. And if a child learns through any number of ways that this substance will help relieve that, and then they try it and they find it works, then they tend to repeat it because it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is important that if you have a child who, say, is smoking marijuana because of anxiety, that you treat not just the marijuana use, but you treat the anxiety. You have to treat both in these children that have both a substance use disorder and an underlying issue. It's very important that both be treated.
Yeah. Otherwise, they will most likely continue to go back to that drug
They will.
place.
They will relapse. It's just a question of time.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, Richard, if we could just back up a little bit. What do you say to the parent that discovers that their child has been using? They find it in their room. The child gets into some trouble with, law enforcement or at school, and it's this big surprise shock of, oh my goodness, this is happening.
Yeah, here we are.
That's kind of what happened with us
and
my daughter.
I think parents go through so many emotions, as you guys probably are well aware of, when they first discover their child is using, and then they find out how much they've been using and all this other information. And then they not only become frightened, they begin to question themselves as a parent. Where did I go wrong? How did I miss the warning signs? And to me, that tells me, well, those are all pretty normal reactions that a parent would have. But it also brings up the issue of parents need help and support as well, not just the child. So if you're a parent and you're confronted with this, please get some help for yourself. It might be a good friend that you confide in and trust. It might be another family member. It might be a professional counselor. But as you go through this journey with your child, it's important that you take care of yourself, that you get support, because this is going to be a journey that's going to have its ups and downs along the way. But you will get through it. There will be hope. There will be recovery, and you and your child and your family can get past this.
Yeah. I remember feeling what what could I have done to prevent this? I mean, I had talked to her about drug use for years, and I'm a recovering addict myself, and she knew my journey and knew how difficult that was, and that she was possibly had genetic predispositioning to it. And this was an open topic. And then to have that happen, I just kept questioning, what did I miss? What could I have done better? And how could this have happened after everything I've done? And I think parents tend to beat themselves up and feel really judgmental towards themselves or even embarrassed when these things come up.
I think that's right. And it's one of the reasons why I wrote the parent workbook that goes along with this book to help parents go through these emotions, learn some communication skills, learn how to focus on the feelings and the words, and how to deal with anxiety. But those are all very common emotions that parents go through. And the message to them is, if you're going through that and having those feelings, they're very normal. There's nothing wrong with you. They're very normal and to be anticipated and expected.
Right.
And now when they're in this state of shock, they've just found something or learned something, what advice do you have to them as they interact with their child in that moment?
First of all, take a deep breath. Calm down.
Calm down.
Maybe take some time, to just slow down a little bit before you have that conversation with your child, because you might be feeling angry, you might be feeling betrayed, you might be feeling neglectful as a parent, you might be going through all of these emotions. That's probably not the time to have a conversation with your child. Right. You want to calm down, cool down, and then in a little bit of time, I think you'll feel more comfortable having this discussion.
Yeah.
So collect yourself first.
Yes.
Kind of come up with a strategy. Again, the curiosity mindset.
Yes.
Separate the behavior from the child so that you're not attacking or being judgmental, even in your heightened state of emotions.
Right.
And then stay calm.
Yeah.
And it may be sort of rehearse either with your spouse or by yourself this conversation that you want to have with your child. Get some feedback on it, because I think that can be helpful too. I think you'll feel better prepared and more confident to have this discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really good. In lots of different parenting discussions, we talk about how, do we really have to respond to this child in this moment with this behavior, like right now? Is it going to make a difference if I take 45 minutes or an hour, even to say to the child, I'm not sure what to do with this. I'll be back in an hour. Like, the child knows, okay, the gig's up. They're not sitting there going, ooh, I think I still got away with it. They're not, it's not reality.
It's just exploded.
But taking that hour can actually bring value to the overall process, as opposed to feeling like I have to react to it right now in this moment.
Yeah, I think that's a very good observation. And chances are, if you jump right into this conversation with all of those feelings of anger and betrayal that you're feeling, that's going to be a conversation that's not going to go very well.
Yep.
And as you pull back from it and you calm down and you think about how you want to have this conversation, it may likely surprise you on how well it goes, and it may actually surprise the child on how well it goes, because you're going to start that conversation not from a stance of being angry or upset, but perhaps from an inquiry type of mind, a curiosity type of mind. And that's not going to be what this child expects. This child expects you to come down on them, to yell and to scream and to tell them they better not do this again. And after you've calmed down, if you come back from a curiosity point of view, that's going to totally surprise them. That they're not expecting that.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, that can make the difference between doing some real damage and harm to helping them to get the help they need, and gaining a little bit of willingness if you can approach it from a calmer perspective, I think.
Better chances of getting to that assessment, even if they're pushing back.
Yeah, that's right.
Take some self-control, though.
That's right.
It's not easy to do, because you're wrapped up in all of these emotions of fear and anger, and you just want to, perhaps lash out
Mm-hmm.
or express all of that. And that's probably not the best time to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the child's going to pick up on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for those pointers, Richard.
Yeah,
We
no,
need
that's
those.
great. Absolutely. So I'm thinking about people listening in, and our show is all about blended families.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what's really common in blended families is that the step parent has a bit more of an objective perspective than the bio parent might.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine this is true in first families as well, where one spouse might have some suspicions and the other spouse doesn't want to address it. And then in blended families, that gets even more amplified because now me, stepdad, has to come to this wife that I love and say, honey, I think there's a real problem with your kid. And that conversation doesn't always go very well. So when two parents just aren't on the same page, talk to us a little bit about how you might help either that parent who does have the concern to talk to their spouse or their partner, or just how you would talk to the couple about getting them on the same page.
Well, I think it's probably more frequent than what we know, where the two are not on the same page. And kids can pick up on that fairly quickly. They're going to gravitate to the parent that they perceive as more permissive and less restrictive and play that game. So I think it's important that parents be on the same page, especially on this issue of substance abuse. And the disagreement is not going to be whether or not our kids should be smoking marijuana. We're probably both going to agree with that one, that it's not the best practice, but it's more likely to be on whether or not there's a serious issue here, questioning, is this really going on? So I think it's important that they be on the same page and that the couple have this type of discussion first, that a husband and a wife can sit down and they can listen to each other's point of view, that they can listen to each other's concern, not from a judgmental point of view, but from an information point of view. You need to have that discussion first, long before you talk to the kid. And if there's a disagreement on what you're seeing, then I think you need to work through that. You need to examine it, and you need to work through it. And if you need some help with a professional, then by all means take advantage of that too.
Right.
Yeah. And just a tip for step parents, if you're the one that's discovering, you find something in the child's room, calm down before you talk to your partner, the bio parent. Do all those things we just talked about a minute ago.
I know.
Calm.
I can remember a couple times where I came across things with Annika, and you were at work or something, and I would call you on the phone just ranting.
Slam me over the head with it.
It just didn't go well. I love that, hey, it's really about getting on the same page, and the things we think we might end up arguing about probably aren't even the arguing points as a couple. Like you said, chances are we may not disagree about whether or not they should be smoking pot, but we're going to maybe disagree on whether it's actually happening or not.
Or how we're going to address it.
Or how we're going to...
Disagreement comes in.
Sure.
Yeah. And another thing that can really make it challenging for our listeners is that there's another home. A lot of times the child is moving between two bio parents, and those two bio parents are sometimes not on the same page around lots of things like bedtime and eating habits and, 101 other things. So do you have any ideas or suggestions around communicating with that other bio parent that you're divorced from and helping them to see the importance of getting on the same page around this issue?
That's unfortunately can be a very complicated project because you've got two sets of adults. And if the child is splitting time equally between both sets of parents, then they're in different environments. There may be different rules. There might be different standards. But the way I would approach it is this is dealing with the health and safety of the child.
Right.
This is no different than if a medical emergency happened or the child got hurt. You want to be, both couples want to be on the same page going in the same direction, whether it's treatment for an illness or treatment for a substance use disorder. So I think that once you have this concern that you need to have a discussion with the other parents that are involved, and hopefully they will listen to your point of view. They may even contribute to what they're seeing. If, on the other hand, they just become oppositional and say, this is not going on, I don't believe it, and then there's really not much you can do. You have to deal with what you have, recognizing that you may be dealing with a set of parents that are just not in the real world. And it's unfortunate, but there's probably not a whole lot you can do to change them at that point.
But you can still move forward with getting your child help.
And you should. You have to do what you feel is right.
What you can do.
Absolutely.
Richard, you need to start coaching blended families. You hit the nail on the head.
You're really
there.
good at this.
I'll leave that to you guys.
That's great. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about something I think that, it's kind of come up a couple times here in the conversation. One thing I noticed as we, look through your book, you talk about drugs, not only the illegal drugs, but also some of the legal drugs. You talk about some of the misuse of prescription drugs as well, and those kinds of things. And this one, I think, is a big conversation in our culture right now. And it's around, we've used the example of marijuana multiple times. We've got lots of states legalizing marijuana, and there's all kinds of opinions about, is marijuana good? Is marijuana not so good? And you're dealing with an addicted child. Why is marijuana a problem for young kids?
The same reason that any other illicit drug is harmful for kids. And that is that the adolescent brain is in the process of developing and maturing. Our brains don't get fully developed until we're around age 24 or 25.
Right.
So when we talk about this issue of marijuana being legal for adults, that's completely different than whether it should be made available for adolescents, because an adult smoking marijuana has a fully developed brain. There still may be consequences, but an adolescent brain is in the process of developing, and it needs to be protected because marijuana and these illicit drugs can do some real damage to that developing brain. The example that I would give you was when I was working with teenagers that were smoking marijuana, and they were smoking multiple times a day, a lot of them to manage anxiety. When the psychological tests came back, it showed that the processing speed of their brain was below average, their short-term memory was impaired, and their motivation was really, really depressed. Now, was marijuana causing all of that? Probably not. Was it contributing to it? Yes, probably so. So my point is that the difference between adults and adolescents when it comes to using substances rests on the vulnerability of the brain and what these drugs have the potential to do to that brain.
Right.
And parents need to protect the brain of their child. So, if it's legal, for adults, okay, that's fine. That whatever, adults can do what they want. But for children, parents, I think, need to recognize that their child's brain is in the process of maturing and developing, and they need to do everything they can to protect that brain. And that involves staying away from substances like marijuana and other illicit drugs that can damage the brain.
Absolutely. I think one thing we experienced with my daughter is that she was also emotionally stunted because she was turning to drugs in order to deal with these difficult emotions and these emotional issues. She didn't learn how to cope, cope with emotional circumstances in her life, and it really stunted her. And it took her quite a while to kind of catch up to her age development group because she was kind of lagging there.
Yeah, that's a great point, because once the child finds that the substance relieves the difficulty that they're going on, they're going to rely on that rather than to learn some skills, for example, on how to deal with anxiety, you know, and that can, as you say, sort of hamper or delay their development.
Yeah, there's lots of skills they need to learn.
Yeah.
I mean, so many that aren't being learned.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Richard, earlier, before we came on, you asked where we lived. And we live in this little small community way up in the Northwest. And we've got this great little neighborhood. And we got an alley in the back, and our kids grew up playing in the alley. And it's kind of one of those, you know, like TV show type, quaint little places to raise kids.
Like Leave It to Beaver.
And it feels really, yeah, right. That's right.
Date myself.
I was going to say, how many people still remember Leave It to Beaver?
I do. I used to watch
all right,
it.
We're with you. Yes.
Richard does,
yeah, we do too. But my point is, you know, we've felt really safe and protected in this environment. It's been a great place to raise kids, but is any child totally protected?
It's a great question, and the answer is no. Every child is vulnerable to being captured by substances like marijuana or other illicit drugs. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what your family income is. It doesn't matter which religion you belong to. And it doesn't matter what school you go to. All children are susceptible to being caught up by alcohol or drugs. There are protective environments, but no child is completely protected. And that illusion that we live in an area which, my child goes to a school where it's unlikely that they are getting involved with substance or being in contact with them, that's a very misleading and dangerous perception, because all children are vulnerable, and as parents, we need to recognize that. These drugs are readily available. If we ask seniors in high school, how easy is it for you to get a drug like marijuana, 80% of them tell us it's easy. Okay, it's no problem. I can find it. If we ask them how easy is it to get a drug like LSD, 30% of them tell us that's easy. I know where to get that. And it's the same for alcohol. So these drugs are readily available, and these kids know it.
Yeah. And we learned that in our little Leave It to Beaver town. Our daughter was offered drugs on her cheerleading squad, where they all have to sign a code of conduct that they will not use any substance or alcohol. And yet not all, but some of these girls were using substances regularly and offering it to the rest of the kids.
That's right.
Unfortunately, that is very common.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and this is a very conservative community as well.
Absolutely.
Where,
I wanted to circle back around to that just to highlight that, you know, one, we experienced that. We thought we were in a pretty safe, great environment, which we are. It doesn't change the fact that we're in a great environment. But yet we had to suffer through that season. But then, even more importantly, highlighting the work that you're doing here of bringing awareness and helping people understand and helping them think through the signs or the concerns that they have. And that's exactly what you're doing in your work and in your book and helping with parents. And we are really appreciative of that work. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, the goal here is to give information to parents, you know, to help them feel less fearful and better prepared, to know what the warning signs are, because many parents do not know what the warning signs are because nobody told them what to look for, and just to feel confident. But also, as I said, I think earlier, I want to give them a sense of hope that they and their family can get through this, that there are professional assessments that can give you the information that you need. There is a whole range of treatment options depending upon the diagnosis, and treatment does work.
Yes,
and you do a great job mapping all of that out in the book.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. So Richard, as we start to bring this conversation to a close, I wonder, let's just imagine we're talking to some parents who they've seen some signs. They've got some concerns. They're at that place. They're not sure what to do. just maybe give us some really simple next 2 or 3 steps that couple should take.
Talk to your child in the ways that we talked about earlier, not an accusing, judgmental way, but from a point of curiosity and love, and see what information you can gather from the child. The next step is to get the assessments done so that as a parent, you have the information that you need. You know what the diagnoses are. You know if there's an underlying issue that needs to be treated and how severe it is, and that you have a treatment plan to move forward. And then the next issue is as you move your child into treatment, if needed, and there's a whole range of treatment options that are available to you, then take care of yourself, get support, get help. And if you're a couple, talk to each other, go through this journey together. It can be a bumpy road, but I think that as you go through this process and you see your child start to grow and develop and mature and come out of it, I think that you will be fairly pleased with the results that you can see.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
So encouraging.
Absolutely. And I'm going to add one thing to that, Richard. I think in parallel to everything you just said, go to Amazon and buy Richard's book.
Thank you.
Read
it. Absolutely. Go get it because it can create some common language for you as a couple. It can bring some understanding and maybe, like we talked about earlier, to take some fear out of the process, to understand that we can walk through a process. And we talked earlier about getting on the same page. I mean, it might even be a very simple way to reach out to that ex to say,
2 copies.
say, get an extra copy, and then to say, hey, I really have some legitimate concerns about our child here. Would you just be willing to take a look at this really easy read?
It's 100 pages.
And
then maybe request a meeting with them to talk about what they learned from the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Share the book with them. Give them a copy of it and ask them just to please read it, and then we can talk about it. I'd be interested in knowing your thoughts about what you read. Maybe we can have a conversation about this. And I mentioned this in the book. If you're a husband and a wife, you both need to read the book, not just the wife, but the husband needs to read the book and talk about it and work through it together. And I think that's the best benefit of the book.
Don't do it in isolation. That's right.
And get support.
Yeah. So good, Richard. Thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you, where's the best place to find you?
I would recommend going to the book's website, which is www.helptheaddictedchild.com.
Great.
They'll find resources on that website. They'll find book reviews, endorsements. They can read a sample chapter. There's a link that will take them directly to Amazon where they can order the Kindle version of the book, which is priced at 99 cents. Or they can get the paperback version for people who like to make notes and highlight things. So both of those are available. There's a link that'll take them directly to Amazon. And then there's a link where if they want to, they can contact me. It'll send me a message. They can write me a note. They can ask me a question, and that'll come directly to me.
Perfect. That's great.
And they can also get the workbook on Amazon as well, the parent
They can get the parent workbook, and I recommend that parents do that, and it's best used in consultation with a good friend or maybe your spouse where you can get feedback or a counselor as you work through the various exercises in the workbook. And again, it's not very long either, but it's good to get feedback on the exercises that are in there.
That's great. Well, we'll put a link to that website on the show notes, as well as probably the book and the workbook out on Amazon. Great. And then people can go right to there from the show notes and find you.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to go through this and for your own contributions to the discussion. I think they were very helpful.
Well, thank you, Richard.
Yes, we appreciate the work you're doing, and we're just so grateful that you were able to take the time to come and talk to us and support our listeners in this really tough topic.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Richard.
Thanks,
we
guys.
Really appreciate it. Wow, what a great conversation. I really enjoy Richard.
He's awesome.
He communicates in a way that gives a great sense of balance of truth and love. He's encouraging to parents, and he wants them to face the truth around these difficult realities, but he wants to do that with love and grace,
Yeah.
not just for the child, but for themselves as well.
Yeah.
And we love that his goal in writing this book is to give parents hope.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks again, Richard, for writing your book and for your continued work in equipping parents and supporting children through all the challenges of substance abuse.
Yes, and I would say this book is a must read for every parent, every step parent or caregiver. And it's only 100 pages.
Yeah, it's pretty short.
Yeah, and I really look at it as an investment into your kids' future. Just like educating yourself around childhood illnesses and healthy development or researching the best choices for college, this is something that's just too important. And we can't afford to ignore these issues around addiction and the underlying causes.
Yeah.
Honey, I wish we'd had this book and all of this informative information that Richard shares in it when we were forced to face Annika's addictive behaviors, which was one of the most painful seasons that we've ever gone through as a couple and as a family. And I also wish that we'd been better prepared, honestly.
I totally agree. And at the same time, I want to say that if we had stuck our heads in the sand and avoided Annika's behaviors or overlooked this issue, I really hate to think about where she'd be now.
Oh, yeah. I really think there's a good chance she would have continued down that really destructive road she was on. And
yeah, I'm grateful that we were able to eventually get on the same team and take action by setting some appropriate boundaries and loving Annika well at the same time. She talked a little bit about this when she and I chatted about her experience growing up in our home back in episode 87. She actually thanks us now for confronting her behavior and for taking a tough love approach to her poor choices with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, she does.
And if you want to hear more about our story from Annika's perspective around this issue, we'll put a link in the show notes to that episode.
Yeah, it's amazing that she thanks us now.
I know it is. Yeah. I didn't think she was going to.
Now, if this is something you're struggling with right now, we're so sorry. We know about the disbelief and the confusion and the heartbreak. We know that firsthand. And maybe it's been hard for you to get on the same page as a couple around making those tough parenting decisions and setting boundaries and even seeking help for your child or stepchild. And if that's where you're at, please reach out and schedule a free coaching session with us. We're happy to share with you what we've discovered through our journey and to offer you some support and encouragement around this difficult issue.
That's right.
Because it can devastate a marriage and it can create a lot of chaos in your home. We've been there and we eventually learned ways to navigate through it and get on the same page. So if that's you, reach out if you need some help, and we'll put a link in the show notes for you to schedule that.
Yeah, that's right. But that's going to make today's episode a wrap.
Until next time.